Have you ever dreamed of owning a cute little bookshop or cafe in France and wondered, what would that life be like? Living around the corner, walking to open up each morning, sorting books, chatting with customers. And how different would running a business like this be in France versus the US? Well, today is your lucky day because we are in Périgueux, the capital city of the Dordogne department, chatting with Dave, the American owner of Buki's bookshop. And after this video, you're going to have the inside scoop on how this place came to be and what it's like to run it.
First of all, will you just share a little bit about your backstory? Because you've been in France for 10 years, right? Okay.
No, I've been longer. I've been in France for almost 13 years.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, and you didn't follow the typical route that I think a lot of people who watch our channel and end up here in France did. So, I know that that's 13 years condensed down, but will you give us a little bit of the high points of how you ended up at Bradley's in Bordeaux, which is where I first heard of you?
Well, I left America with a backpack. I got a one-way ticket, and I was doing work projects and work exchanges, and which was an interesting experience. Although at a certain point, I felt like it was just working for free.
Yeah.
And
so
not really.
What kind of work was it like?
There were people who had houses they wanted to renovate. It was a lot of English couples, or a lot of people coming from different countries who wanted to buy these little stone houses to develop, and they just realized that they bit off more than they could chew. So a lot of them were.
I feel a little like that right now.
Yeah, of course.
Could you come live with me?
We'll do some work. If you feed me, we're good.
Yeah.
And so I did that for a while, and I felt at a certain point that I had gotten to the end of that road, and so. Did
you speak French when you came?
No, not a word of French.
Wow. Okay.
I knew how to say one thing.
Yeah.
I knew how to say "Puis-je voir une cigarette, s'il vous plaît, mademoiselle." That's what I use that everywhere. That was the only thing I knew how to say. Puis-je voir une cigarette, s'il vous plaît, mademoiselle. That was the only phrase I knew. And so I found myself in Paris. I was sleeping under the bridges for a while, and I met these English guys and an Estonian, and we left Paris on foot. Just south of Paris, we left on foot, and we walked from there to Bordeaux for about 2.5 months.
What?
And it was a good time.
So, I mean, what was that like? I realized
the first 2 weeks were really hard. It was a nightmare. I regretted every second of it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So what am I doing? This is stupid. And the only thing that stopped me was I didn't have enough money to take a plane ticket home, So I just kept going. And after the first 2 weeks, it got easier. I had these huge holes in my boots. I had work boots that were destroyed, 100 miles in.
Wow.
And I kept on trying to find these replacements for the insoles. Yeah. And I just ripped through an insole a week, and it was hard.
Wow.
And Périgueux was one of the places that we slept at, we stayed at. I liked it very much. I had good memories of.
Yeah.
And then we got to...
This is on the journey from Paris to Bordeaux.
Yeah. Got to Ribérac, stayed for a couple of days with a family over there, good friends of mine still, Paul and Julie Herbert. And we were helping them renovate their houses. And then we went on to Bordeaux.
Yeah.
And I got to Bordeaux. It was April 8th, 2013.
Oh, wow. This was like, it's in, what's that word? Indelible's the word I'm thinking, but that's the wrong word.
Well, it's my mother's birthday, and so I called her, and she yelled at me, "What are you doing?" She was very upset at me because I had not given her any news in months at that point. But,
yeah, I bet.
So.
Your mom's amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
I still hope I get to see her again.
And I spent 10 years in Bordeaux.
Yeah.
So long story short,
Yeah.
Certain things I'll share on camera, certain things I won't share on camera. But found a way to stick around in Bordeaux.
Yeah.
And
how did you end up working at Bradley's, which for those of you who don't, Bradley's bookstore, bookshop, is an English bookstore in Bordeaux.
It's an old bookshop. It was founded in 1983, and it had gone through many permutations, many locations, many different owners, and so when I knew Bradley's in the very beginning, it was run by a French lady and her employee, and it closed down at a certain point just before my daughter was born, and I was disappointed to see it close down. It was where I bought all my English books. And then I saw it pop up a few months later, right near where I was living in Bordeaux. And I went every day to the Canadian Kevin who owned it. And I said, "You're going to hire me?" He said, "No, I can't do this." I said, "You're going to hire me." I went every day to get a cup of coffee until he eventually hired me. I was persistent. But I was teaching English at the time. And so I'd already been in Bordeaux for a couple of years at that point. And I was working in restaurants and bars and in the vines and on the dunes and doing a lot of different jobs.
Yeah.
And at that point, my daughter was born, or maybe not yet born. She was maybe in the process of being born when he opened the shop there. And I just insisted. I knew I wanted to do that and work there. It was a cafe bookshop, and that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I eventually got in part-time and then full-time, and then I was running the place for a couple of years with a friend of mine, French friend Tamarie, and it was going well. It was nice.
Yeah. And so, I mean, at that point, what was the impetus when you were like, you know what, I think I want to make the leap and open my own place? And why did you choose Périgueux?
Well, I was already at that point so comfortable with the job I was doing.
Yeah.
And it was a job, I had done so many different jobs. I had, 40 different jobs, 50 different jobs in my life. I'd done everything, except for things that pay well. I haven't done those yet, but I've done all the other ones. And it was the job where even years in, I would wake up every morning and want to go to work.
Wow.
And I was super happy to go to work. And I said to myself, that's never happened to me before.
Yeah.
Where, after, there's been jobs where a couple of months, you're happy to go to work to learn new things, and then at a certain point, you just don't want to do it anymore.
Right.
But this job was years in, I wanted to go every day.
Wow.
I was happy to go to work. I was happy to bring my kids to work. I was happy to, be in that environment.
I think that is part of the American dream.
It was huge. Yeah. It was a leap, of saying, this is a risk I'm willing to take, because it's not something where I'm not sure if I'm going to like it or not. This is something where I've already years at this point been running an English bookshop.
Yeah.
And we'll talk maybe later about the difference between French and American, ways of doing business. But for me, it was very much a great experience as it relates to being part of a community, and then having my own business here in Périgueux. That was a leap, because going from Bordeaux, which is a cosmopolitan, bigger city, population, I think the time since I'd been there, the population had over doubled. Yeah. From 300,000.
I think it's over 1 million in the greater area.
Far from that, but I got there, it was around 300,000. And so being part of a big cosmopolitan city, to coming to the countryside, French countryside, with a population of 30,000 people.
Yeah, because you may, in the U.S., if you're looking at it on a map and you see the Dordogne, Périgueux looks like the big city in the Dordogne, but it's 29,000.
It's more, and dropping. It's not, it's never really gotten over 30,000 in the last decade or so.
Yeah, so it is actually a small town, really.
Yeah, what I was wondering is what kind of population we're going to find in that area.
Yeah, I see.
And I know about the English living in the region and whatnot, in the department. But I just wasn't sure if we were going to have that same cosmopolitan mix of people that we had in Bordeaux.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. Who are looking for English books.
We were looking for Texans.
Who were looking?
We were looking for Texans, and we found Texans. We were very happy. Yes. Mission accomplished.
Yeah, I stumbled in here like a month after he opened, and it was literally, well, we were talking about this earlier. I have felt more at home in France. Yeah. Right from the beginning than I feel like I should, as a foreigner. Mm-hmm. But when I came in here, I was like, I felt like I was in my living room. I don't know. It was like a...
You mean here?
Here in Buki's, yeah.
Well, so not to go too long on this tangent, but in France, they have les assos, there's association, and they have the commerce, the businesses, and they don't really mix. Business is business, and, l'asso is where they have their social...
Oui.
And that's outside of bars and outside of certain places. I'm not saying that's, a hard and fast rule. But the French tend to see these two things as very separate spaces. Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. I would have expected, like that first month you were open, I would have expected that there was, because there are a lot of English in this larger area, and that would have been who I would expect. But no, it's become like the international hub. That's the thing that surprised me.
Yeah, me too. But with all the respect to the English, and I love them very much, they're sometimes a little sauvage, as the French say. They're a little bit kind of doing their own thing, and they wait for the Marmite truck to come on the third Thursday of every month, and they got their own habits.
They're settled.
They're settled. They do their thing.
Yeah. So you made the leap to Périgueux.
Yeah.
Partly, did it have anything to do with those fond memories you associated with way back
part
then?
Part of it, for sure.
Yeah.
Part of it was, remembering that I liked Périgueux, coming through here. And it was very different than what I remembered.
Yeah.
Because I had not been there in 10 years.
Buki's is right in the center of town and is quickly becoming a local institution for the international community.
What I love about Buki's is that every time I go there, I meet somebody from a different part of the world I've never met before. It can be from South Africa, from the States, from Australia, from Russia.
First of all, he has great books.
Yes.
And if he doesn't have a book, he'll order it for you.
Yeah.
Dave is amazing. He's really a sweetheart. Sympathetic. We're from New York, and he's from New York. And it's really a cultural place.
I'm curious too, now you're here, this place is amazing. And I think there's a lot of Americans who kind of have a similar dream, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a knitting store or a bookstore or a cafe, I want to move to French, I want to have a better quality of life, and I want to open my own thing.
Yeah.
So, which parts of it feel like the dream still, and which parts are like, oh man, this gets a little tiresome, right? Because I think I told you before, our channel is usually about optimistic but realistic. So, yeah.
Not to be too optimistic, but I feel, like I said before, when you find something you really love to do, and it was a question I had for a very long time, about the difference between working a 9-to-5 and something you're not really passionate about, and then building a life, which is perfectly acceptable way of living, and it just was never mine.
Yeah.
Or doing something twice as much for half as much money, which is what I do now. But people say you work too much. I work 70 hours a week. I don't have vacations, but you see me working a lot. I'm drinking coffee and talking to friends and checking out books, and I'm not saying that I don't work. I do work hard, but I've built my life around it.
Yeah.
I can have my kids here, who have always grown up in bookshops.
Yeah.
Between Bordeaux and here, and have only known that, and are proud and happy to be part of that.
Yeah.
And know so many people who come into the shop, and they're known by the people who come in, and it's great. So as a having a family, yeah, it really is a personal decision how much energy and effort you want to put into something.
Yeah.
I'm not somebody who ever really took vacations. I'm not somebody who ever really, what am I going to do? Go lie in my bed? And if I need to just close the shop for an hour to go do something, I will.
Yeah.
So it is my shop. I decide how it runs.
Yeah.
And that freedom and that liberty, and also, like my grandfather, we said, I'm not digging holes.
Yeah.
I'm not breaking up, a carbon in a mine somewhere. I'm doing something I love to do, and it is for a lot of people a dream. And I think if you put the energy and the effort that is required, it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
Really, if it's something you really like.
Yeah.
And if you do it right, and you're surrounded by good people, and you treat it less like you have to treat it like a business, but you have to treat it also like you're part of the community. And when you do it, you get that energy back, and you get that love back, and you get that all that good stuff back to you 1,000 times, which keeps you going.
Yeah. You said I think as you were talking about that, you said something interesting, which is if you choose this kind of life, you want to choose something that your life can really marry with, because that's probably what it's going to be. And in that respect, I think self-employment in the US and self-employment in France is pretty similar, but it's easier to get medical insurance here.
Oh, for sure.
When you're self-employed.
I've always said, and again, this is a whole other conversation, but with the quality of life that we have in France, notably the social aid, the subsidies, the medical coverage, when you're not living with desperate people, it changes how you interact with your community.
Oh, I agree.
And so I can't imagine. It's funny, when I came to France from New York, people are going, oh, yeah, I can't imagine people just getting shot all the time and all the violence. And I'm going, it's not like that. And now, 13 years later, I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, I can't imagine how anybody lives in America.
Oh,
and I'm not going to get into the political conversation, but I can't imagine going back and living in America. I have zero desire to.
Yeah.
Because I feel like in America, to have the quality of life I would have here, you have to build walls around what you make, because it's not the same relationship you have to community, it's not the same relationship you have to other people.
Yeah.
Here I feel very much part of the community, integrated into the community. My kids can run around the street, that my daughter can go get something from the shop, she knows everybody knows her.
Yeah.
I feel very safe here.
Yeah.
And people, again, are not super desperate. And there are people desperate everywhere, but people have their bills paid more or less, their medical coverage, It's not a question if they're able to, get medical attention or not. If they need time off from work, they get it. And so the quality of life is so much less desperate that you really do, I think, feel a lot of closeness to your neighbors. Because that element is removed from the situation.
I agree.
And so I don't care if I can make 5 times more money in America. I think to have the quality of life that I would want to have and to live with the values that I want to have, I don't think I could get that in America.
Yeah, that's really well said.
If you're considering living in this area of France, or even if you're just passing through, Buki's is a place you want to check out.
What do I like about Buki's? I like that as an English-speaking American, I like that it is a refuge here in Périgueux because during the day or at the end of the day, I have a brain headache from trying to keep up with all the French speakers. My wife was French, but we spoke franglais, so that doesn't count. And David is a treasure in his own way.
What I love about Buki's is it's not just a bookshop, it's a cultural centre. It's a place where people come and get to know each other and support each other and help each other and point each other in a new direction. To people who've arrived in France for the first time, feeling a bit lost, they come to Buki's and they find people who've been through the same experience and help them find a new direction.
France is not as much a materialist culture as America is. So when you look at what it means to not have a lot in France versus not having a lot in America, that's a very different, I think, phenomenon because America is so materialist. And number one, I don't pay childcare. I've never paid childcare. I've never paid school. I've never paid. There's things that I don't pay in France that I would pay a lot of money for in America. My brother and his wife live in California. And I think it costs $3,000 a month for childcare. And that's with a break, I think, because of where they work. Rent is $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month, depending on where you are. Healthcare is $3,000 a month. I mean, these costs add up.
I'm feeling like stressed just as you're saying that.
I don't even know how people do it. I don't know.
Oh my God. I know.
I don't know how anybody would go through doing that because I think a lot of what American culture is about getting ahead, is about crushing the competition. It's about showing your material worth. And again, I don't want to make a generalization, but that's been my experience of growing up in America. And you come to France and people are not driving fancy cars. And they're pretty nice to each other. And they even fight pretty well. I know I'm from New York. I know, the childhood I had, but sometimes I think back and I feel like it happened to somebody else. I feel so removed, But I do feel that being from where I'm from, some of that that's bled over into my French life is the openness. Because the French have this thing where, obviously the vouvoirs and the tutoiement, we have the formal and the informal way of talking to people. And I don't really, and controversial, let us know in the comments what you think. I don't vouvoie anybody, I tutoie everybody. And that mix of, my accent and tutoie, I feel like sometimes, and nobody's ever said anything to me negatively about it. Except for a gentleman from Chile who took exception to it. He was the only person.
Oh, how funny.
Who was like, no, you're vouvoie. French people who are not from the same region or kind of moving around, or even French people from where they're from, they have these ways of marking their distance from other people. And as an American with an accent coming in, tutoying everybody, I feel like that has been the sense of immediacy that has never been expressed as a negative thing from people. And I don't know, I've always felt very warm and close to people. In a way that when I watch French people interact, there's a little bit of trepidation around, okay, where are we right now? Because the Americans, they get really close. And then if
we just speed right past that. We're totally oblivious.
But it's the opposite, If Americans want to be close, they go, I'm right here, let's get close. And then if I don't want you, I have to push you out of my space. Versus the French, it's like, okay, I've seen you there, I'll bring you into my space.
There's like a warming up,
they bring you into the space.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. We do it the opposite way.
I love the bees.
Yeah, me too.
I love the bees. The first time I did a bees with a guy, it was like, I didn't know we were at that relationship to the point where we would, and it was cool. I like taking my friends and, and there's so many different nuances in the bees. And, all my friends, there's different ways of welcoming them and saying hello to them. And even strangers, like I said, you have a way of talking with them that's more than just formal and distant. It's warm and cordial. I think that, makes people feel welcome. And I think that's something that the French are still a little bit complexed about, to use the French term complexé, you know. I think they're still a little bit in their own heads about, in terms of how do you greet people, how do you judge distance, how do you, you know, where do you stand in relationship to this person?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's an American thing that I still have never gotten over 13 years later.
Yeah.
Of, you know, seeing somebody being warm, welcoming, wanting to know their business, talking to them, you know.
I actually think that's one of our best characteristics as a culture. So
yeah, it's also one of our worst characteristics. Because then you go, oh, I don't want to know you anymore. And then that's a violent act.
Well,
You know?
do you think, like, I feel like Americans tend to make more, like, weaker connections, and I don't mean that in, like, a bad way, but, like, we just tend to be more looser connections, and I feel like the French are fewer but tighter connections when it comes to...
Well, because they're sincere, yeah.
Yeah.
They're sincere about who they want to make connections with and how they go about doing it. Versus, and not to say that there isn't a sincerity with the American connections.
Oh, yeah. No,
but you just
I agree.
can't do it with every person you meet
Yes.
on the Walmart, like, shopping line. You know, you can't, you know, my mom... She come home and she told me about the 7 people she talked to, and she doesn't remember any of their names, and we'll never see them again. And but she had those conversations and those interactions, and you know, it's Americans almost like dogs sniffing each other all the time. They're very excited to see each other, and then they forget about them immediately once they're not long.
Oh my God, that's true though, because like our closest friends here are French, and sometimes they will offer to do things or help us with things that like in the US, I would only ask my best friend. And I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, c'est normal.
The French are great friends.
Yeah. And I'm like, I
friends.
feel like I am not a good enough friend to her sometimes, because I'm like, I don't think I'm as good a friend as she is.
The French are great friends, and they're very, you know, again, those connections are very strong. And that's another reason why I like being in France. Because I feel like there's a tremendous amount of sincerity that goes on with French relationships. That I've never felt in America.
Yeah,
you know, so that is definitely something that...
You know, Americans contact us all the time, right? They have a dream. And so if they're thinking that they want to come to France, they want to open a business, do you have any words of wisdom with just like the journey to France, the immigration that you want to leave people with? Don't
skip steps. You know, you have to take your time, you know, get in line with everybody else who wants to do it. And the work you put in is the work you get out. But, you know, I think... Evidently, I mean, again, not to cause controversy, but we remember that article that popped up a couple months ago about this couple's, do you remember this, no? This couple moved to France and they
Oh my God, yeah, we did a whole video about that.
By this. Yeah,
yes.
I don't want to, you know, get into it.
No,
but no. I read that.
They all saw it.
Yeah, okay. Well, not to bring back, you know, old controversy or anything, but...
we'll reference the video that we talked about in it.
You could put the link in, whatever.
Yeah.
You know. But... when I read that, I understood very well that these people were not sincere about going through the process of, you know, learning the language, being a part of the community, taking your time, doing it little by little, accepting the love and help of your neighbors. That stuff that we talked about is so important.
Yeah.
In that you can't skip those steps.
Can't skip.
You're not going to airdrop in with everything ready to go. You know, these are where the French stereotype comes up. Things don't happen very quickly.
No.
They don't happen very well either a lot of the times. And you know, when you talk about the construction aspect or the paperwork and stuff, there's a lot of things that get lost or confused, and you just have to keep on doing it.
Yeah, you just keep going.
Keep on sending the same documents. Yes. You know, keep on insisting on the same point, and it eventually, once you bang your head enough on the wall, it opens, and you don't know which way you banged it that made it open, but it did.
Yeah.
And as long as you're, you know, consistent and persistent and patient, then it happens. And just don't skip steps. If that's really a dream that you want, it's not going to happen in a week or a month or a year.
Yes.
You know, I came with a backpack 13 years ago, and you know, all this time later, I've been able to do something with that. You know, but it was a lot of 2 steps forward and a couple steps backwards, and you know, feeling like you're spinning your wheels, feeling like it's not working, feeling like. But it's part of the process, and the more Americans I meet, the better I feel to know that I'm not alone in the fact that things just don't work. The first or the second or the third time, but then the 4th time they might work, and then, you know.
I don't know. I feel like we've gotten really lucky because a lot of things, but then maybe that's just because I did have to send my birth certificate 3 times to get my health care.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But I just sent it.
If you send it once or twice and then you go, I already sent it, I'm not going to send it.
Oh, no.
Well, then I don't know what to tell you. You just have to send it 3 times.
Yeah.
And just be patient and trust the process.
Yeah, it works. Things take time, but it works.
They work.
Yeah.
They feel like they're not working because we're used to a different speed of life.
Yeah.
But, you know, you might have just given them a document right before 3 people went on sick leave and
the May holidays
and 4
started.
holidays and the bridges and all these, you know, so, you know, eventually it will get to the person it's supposed to get to.
Right, yeah.
You know, they lost my language test for like 10 years.
For 10 years?
And then they found it 10 years later. And I kept on telling them, I did the language test. And they said, no, you didn't. And I said, well, this, not to go on a tangent, but I did the language test, the B2. I got, you know, I used it to get into a master's in philosophy that I was doing in Bordeaux. And I didn't finish it. In the meantime, you got a job and married, had kids. And I did, you know, the first year of it. And so years later, they said, you never did the language test. And I said, well, I did because I got into a master's. And the master's required the language test.
Yeah.
So therefore, I had that, but we don't have it. Okay.
This is why Jason and I constantly tell you, keep every piece of paper.
Don't send any originals.
Don't send any originals.
Don't send any originals.
We cannot say this
keep
enough
everything.
times.
Cannot say it enough. And so 10 years later, and they're like, oh, we found it.
Oh my God.
And you know, so
yeah.
sometimes it takes 6 months, sometimes it takes 10 years, but it eventually happens.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Coming in expecting that, I think, is like, that is the difference in people who get frustrated and are like, I'm out of here. And people are like, oh, you just got to keep doing the next thing, figuring it out.
You are not going to be able to, your money is no good here in a lot of ways. In the sense, and what I mean by that is what you pay is not forcibly what you get.
Yeah.
Where you're not going to be able to fast track certain things. Certain things take time.
Yeah.
And so if
there's no like upgrade VIP because you threw a little more money at the situation.
You're not going to be able to fast track it. You have to get in line with everybody else, which is the charm of France. Égalité, fraternité. You know, you have to go at the speed of the country, and it doesn't go very fast. And you know, just get used to it. And it's not bad actually to live a slower. Yeah,
it's
you know, learning how to live a slower way of life.
Yeah.
Is very nice.
It is. It's very nice.
It is.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like that's a good note to close on. But if you are coming anywhere around Périgueux, stop in, say hello. Friday afternoons are the buzzing time for
especially
for all the international crew. Oh, you guys always make me feel so nice when I show up here. It's a nice meeting place, and now Dave serves. You can get drinks too besides coffee.
Alcohol license. So we do specialty coffee. We do good local alcohols.
Oh, if you
local beers.
The pasties if you haven't tried pasties, like if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's the summer drink, and he has local stuff. It's very good. We'll wrap up there, but I feel like you're gonna see Dave again. Thanks for watching.
À bientôt.